On air. Okay, hey everybody, this is Mike, and I'm here with Cerise.
Hey, hi everyone.
So we're gonna have a talk about cryptocurrency. I've been playing around in this space for a few years now, and Cerise is relatively new. Is that accurate, Cerise?
Yeah, it's pretty accurate.
So Cerise, why don't you just tell me about, well, yeah, you got some questions, so let's just jump right into it.
Okay, well, how about we start at the beginning with the simplest question. What is cryptocurrency?
Well, that's that's a very simple yet complicated question in and of itself. I guess it depends really how technical you want to get into it. But for simplistic purposes, let's just say cryptocurrency is basically a form of digital money that's based upon cryptography. And this cryptography is basically how we create the security for the money, which is backed upon its own blockchain. And the blockchain basically is, one could look at it as just the ledger, so the accounting. So it shows the transactions on it. And that could get way more technical, but for most everyday users, you don't necessarily need to know all the technical under the hood. Just like when you use your email, you don't necessarily know how it ends up, when you send an email, how it ends up to where it ends up.
Okay. Now, for someone who's starting out with cryptocurrency, where do you start? Because there's so many different currencies available now, and it all seems kind of daunting to someone who's just kind of stepping into that realm. So where do you start?
That's a great question. There's a lot of different options, obviously, as you're pointing out. So really, there's some opportunity in terms of maybe where your interest lies. And I mean, just a couple of years ago, for the most part, anybody who wanted to start with cryptocurrency, it was mostly Bitcoin. So how do you go about getting Bitcoin? And there's a number of different options depending, especially where you're located. But one of the most popular methods, I would say, is local Bitcoins. And that's basically set up kind of like a Craigslist in a way, where regular people all over are listing the sale and also buying. So buying and selling Bitcoins directly peer-to-peer. So you could meet somebody at the coffee shop, or they could say, okay, here's my bank account info, deposit it to this account, show me a picture that you deposited to this account, and I'll send you the Bitcoin. And people have established reputations with doing it that way. So, if somebody has done a lot of transactions, you can be pretty trusting that if you go about depositing to their bank account that way, that it's going to be all right. So that's one method. There's also a number of different Bitcoin exchanges. Coinbase is a very big, popular one. There's a number of others. Also, there's Bitcoin ATMs, depending on the city or town you're in. It's kind of an entrepreneurial venture in terms of Bitcoin ATMs being in different locations. So with a Bitcoin ATM, you could basically just take your cash and put it into the machine. And so long as you have a Bitcoin wallet set up, you can get your Bitcoin to that wallet. And actually, I believe on some of the machines now, you don't even need to have an already existing wallet set up. That how the Bitcoin will come out, it's like you'll just basically have two keys. And so it's like having your own paper wallet of Bitcoin, because the information's on the paper. So yeah, Bitcoin definitely was the first, and there's a number of ways you can get it. I mean, perhaps the easiest way somebody who's new to Bitcoin would get Bitcoin, especially, yeah, it would be from a friend sending them a small bit of Bitcoin. Like, for instance, I could say, hey, Cerise, let me just open up my wallet on my phone here, and let me just send you this app so that you can download this wallet for your phone, and let me just send you $5. So it could be that easy as well.
Okay, so Bitcoin is something that I have heard a lot about, and I mean, I'm in South Africa, and us getting the news down here is a pretty big thing. It's becoming available down here to maybe not to do everyday kind of purchases.
Sir, you cut out there for a second. Did you say that again?
Okay, so Bitcoin is, even now in South Africa, something that is becoming well known, and it's becoming used more in trade and things like that. Maybe not for everyday purchases, but it is becoming more readily available. So maybe the direction that I want to kind of take this in is, okay, Bitcoin is pretty well known, but what about all these other currencies? Because there's I've heard about ethereum, and then there's websites where they've literally hundreds of cryptocurrencies listed of startups, and what do you do with all this information? How do you know which way to go, or what to play with, or what to what to do?
Yeah, so a good website that I like to use pretty much every day. I look at it, and I guess maybe that's because I have different investments in play with different coins, is Coin Market Cap. Yeah, maybe I should just write that in the chat here for anybody who's new. Coinmarketcap.com. It lists basically pretty much all the cryptocurrencies around. So yeah, like you're saying, there's a ton of them, and on CoinMarketCap it lists them from basically their valuation in terms of the total market cap valuation. So Bitcoin's #1, Ethereum's #2, I think Ripple's #3, and basically it goes down in terms of their market valuation. Basically how much money from fiat essentially. Well, no, let me put it this way. Basically, what the value is of that coin, what it's trading at, what the current price is based on the supply of that coin. So it's listed in terms of its size. So 1, 2, 3, 4, all. Man, there's almost 1,000, I think, on there now. So there's quite a lot. So yeah, what do you do with that is a great question, because it's okay, so many coins, what do I want to do? This very much so in a lot of ways is an investigation project in and of itself. I mean, the average person, obviously, I mean, I don't know if there's anyone even on the planet who knows everything about every single cryptocurrency out there, especially in the last couple of years. The common saying was, if it's not Bitcoin, well, it's an altcoin, because Bitcoin's first. But even years ago, it was the kind of general regard for other cryptocurrencies was thinking of it as a shit coin because it wasn't known or whatnot, and maybe it was being created for just a quick buck. But now there is a number of different coins are being created to serve distinctively different purposes from Bitcoin. And so, for instance, if you go to CoinMarketCap and you want to look, down the leaderboard, let's call it, of the listing of the coins, basically it'll link you to a website and also the community that's built around that coin. So basically, yeah, it'll require some investigation further on any individual's part who wants to know further. Definitely an easy place to start would be, you know, look at the list and just start clicking, reading about is a way to go about it. Another method is to, you know, like for instance, I could say like, hey, Cerise, maybe you should check out this one. Like you're on Steem it now. Steem is on the list there as a cryptocurrency itself. And so, I mean, that Steem, for instance, is a cryptocurrency that's distinctively different than Bitcoin. So I see long-term development and growth with Steem because it has usefulness that's not currently being expressed, used in other ways. And I mean, we could get way into it, but yeah, I'm curious to hear more from you.
I actually now have some questions about what's been happening in the last, like maybe a couple of weeks with Bitcoin. If you know about this whole story that's going on, the market value was pretty high, and now it's shot down quite far comparatively. So I read something about there's going to be some kind of split. The Bitcoin people are deciding which direction to take it in. Do you know anything about this, or what is going on there?
Right. Yeah. So this is kind of like there's serious politics happening behind the scenes in Bitcoin, and the politics primarily are occurring between basically two different camps of miners. Okay, are you familiar with like how the mining at all works for Bitcoin?
Kind of. My understanding is that it's a lot of hardware is put into. It's got something to do with algorithms and information and something about that.
Okay. For the purpose of this video, to keep it super simple, basically, yeah, computers essentially, computing power is powering the blockchain network, and that's what keeps it secure and functioning as it does. Now, mining Bitcoin has definitely become a big business of sorts, and so there's two basically big different camps that represent a lot of mining power. So it's like pools of collection of people that, you know, represent a section of like the Bitcoin mining community. There is some people that mine it on their own, but basically over time, the way Bitcoin mining has gone, like you're saying, it's required more and more software upgrades, resources, computing power. Like it started out being, you know, it didn't require much, but that's part of the thing with the way Bitcoin is structured is that it takes a lot of power to power Bitcoin. Now, not all cryptocurrencies have to work like that. In fact, there's a number of them that don't work that way, but that's part of the thing that makes Bitcoin Bitcoin. And basically what the difference is, or, you know, the alleged difference between the different big mining groups is how to proceed forward in scaling Bitcoin. Because right now, you know, Bitcoin can only manage so many transactions per minute. It's actually quite slow in terms of what it could be. And also the fees for processing a Bitcoin transaction, like I send you a Bitcoin, you know, it could cost a couple dollars or something like that. Whereas before it used to maybe cost you a penny or a couple pennies. It's kind of gone up over time. And I mean, the price has gone up also. So what's happening is now that the people that have been mining it and have been investing in mining it for a long time, they're making more money on processing the transactions than they ever were before. So they're providing a service. And so, you know, one of the mining camps is kind of like, well, you know, no, like we don't need to change the way the mining transactions are to be faster and cheaper. It's good how they are. You know, we don't need to make it different, so to speak, to accommodate. Maybe like upgrade the software so it could be maybe a little bit faster. But you know, they want the fees, they kind of like the fees. And so this, you know, this one camp is kind of the notion of like Bitcoin is a store of value. It's not about, you know, buying your coffee with Bitcoin per se. It's for like holding your wealth. Like some regard it as, you know, kind of a digital gold. And you know, these points are all valid. And so the other kind of camp, and both of these kind of camps have large influence in terms of the direction of the network. So it's kind of like butting heads, and it's kind of been an issue back and forth, because how Bitcoin works in terms of the network and it being decentralized the way it does is that agreement must be reached. The term usually used is consensus, but basically for the network to be effective, it requires, you know, it requires like 90-something%, I believe, consensus, so that it's stable, it's strong, it's functioning. And the interesting thing is that, you know, basically everybody who's operating like the hardware for mining Bitcoin basically is faced with a decision, like how are they going to set their algorithm to the computing. And so, you know, a lot of people are influenced or are part of pools that basically they all move together as a pact. And that's kind of like the issue that's been, is between these two different camps that kind of have the extreme viewpoints, where the other camp that I haven't really spoke about is saying, you know, for Bitcoin to get mass adoption, we need it to be super fast, and we need the transactions to be super cheap. You know, people aren't going to buy a cup of coffee with Bitcoin if it costs them $2 on top of the $2 to buy the coffee, right? So that's kind of the bare bones basics to this whole kind of thing. And I mean, yeah, so it's kind of interesting. So let's say there is a split and there's basically two different attitudes basically adapted, as like, you know what, we're gonna go this way with Bitcoin, a large part of the community, and a large part of the community that's mining Bitcoin, it says we're gonna go this way and this is how we think to do it. What would happen is there would be a split on the Bitcoin blockchain, so to speak. And so basically it would be going in two different directions now. And what that would mean is like another coin essentially would be created as like, you know, it could be called whatever, but like Bitcoin this, Bitcoin that. But basically, because this is basically the result of a hard fork, in that there is not just the agreement on how things are all together. And so this has caused a lot of speculation, shall we say, in terms of, you know, what's going to happen with it, because these have been talks that have been happening for a long time. Now, there's been a lot of progress, so to speak, on the talks. I mean, I've kind of speculated that this whole song and dance, you know, could have been just a charade, and somewhat as like to just kind of draw it out, like let's just kind of milk things along. But that's pure speculation as well. And, you know, not everybody's talking to each other. So it's kind of like, oh, well, these people are saying this, these people are saying this. Do we know if those people are talking to those people but not reporting that to these other people and whatnot? So it's kind of an interesting thing, because the miners, the people that are essentially powering the Bitcoin network, are in a lot of ways. And if you think about it just from the miner perspective, you know, if you're the miner and you're putting in this work, I mean, you should kind of be rewarded for your work, right? So it's, you know, but some people think like, well, no, you know, we've already taken so much. It's time to just keep doing the work and we'll get some of the rewards from mining it. We don't need as much as we're getting, kind of thing. So there's different schools of thought on it. The other interesting thing that hasn't really been talked about so much with Bitcoin is that, you know, basically everybody who's a holder of Bitcoin has a voice in Bitcoin as well. And that isn't something that's been very organized per se, as how, you know, each individual holder wants to see the direction of Bitcoin. And to take it further, that, you know, perhaps this is something I kind of thought about, was that perhaps, you know, a lot of people that aren't involved in mining, because there's so many people that have a little bit of Bitcoin or whatnot, you know, perhaps the best way forward with Bitcoin is to change the algorithm altogether, and basically, you know, make it easy to have as many people involved powering the network as possible. I mean, you know, maybe this is not a good idea, and that's totally very possible that that's the case as well. But I haven't seen a lot of discussion in terms of, you know, regular Joes, so to speak, like that are holding Bitcoin, in terms of thinking like, you know, maybe we can influence the direction more so, because we're part of the effectiveness of Bitcoin is on people's participation in it, whether you're a holder or a miner. And right now, kind of the politics are like all in the miners kind of discussion in terms of how things go. So it's been referred to as, you know, the Civil War or the Cold War. Yeah, so it's kind of an interesting thing, because most people, for the most part, are just kind of like, well, let's just wait and see what happens, and maybe, you know, be ready to be quick to act in terms of if there's a split and now there's another coin, or there's two different directions. Yeah, so there's a lot to that, I guess.
Yeah, there's quite a lot to that. It kind of brings to mind the question of, what is it that actually is holding these cryptocurrencies together? Because, you know, they're not backed by any physical resource, or, like, say, for example, they're not backed by gold. They're literally digital. So I suppose my question is, how do they keep alive, so to speak, when they're essentially just ones and zeros?
Well, here's the real interesting thing here. I think the real value is in trust. Basically, that people can exchange directly peer-to-peer, and they can trust in that exchange. Where, you know, you're in South Africa, I'm in Canada. You know, traditionally, for me to send you funds would require, you know, me going to my bank and getting all your info, and then my bank saying, okay, well, you know, we're going to do this wire transfer, but it's going to go, we don't know where it's totally going to go. It's going to go to another bank or another bank. It'll take about 5 to 7 business days to get your funds to your friend. And then depending on the size of the amount of funds I'm sending, my bank may suggest, like, you know, you shouldn't send more than, you know, $5,000, or definitely not more than $10,000, because it's possible, you know, based on who your friend is or whatnot, that the account could be frozen for investing. Sending $10,000 is regarded as suspicious and dangerous in the world we live in today, because it could mean that you're a terrorist or that you're trying to, you know, do something deceptive with the money. And there's all this like stranglehold basically in the current traditional ways in which money moves. There's a lot of paranoia around the movement of money. So these networks, these cryptocurrency networks, are not centralized. Basically, there's no one point of failure, so to speak, on the network. I mean, you could say the one point of failure is, you know, if we have some sort of nuclear holocaust and the whole grid gets shut down, there's no electricity, there's no internet of any kind, you know, we could have a problem in terms of sending our payments around electronically. But I mean, we're going to have a lot of other problems too. So that would, all of a sudden, that problem of not being able to send our payments around would be kind of an irrelevant problem, because there would be much more massive programs or problems, like, you know, like your refrigerator not working, and, you know, where the hell do I get some ice, and things like that. So that's kind of a big point on the whole cryptocurrency thing, is that we're able to exchange directly peer-to-peer privately, that, you know, you can move funds anywhere in the world. And it's kind of like a point of, in a way, self-governance, in that, you know, if I want to send funds to so-and-so, and I know so-and-so, I should be able to do that without somebody else saying, hey, I don't think you should be able to send money to your friend here or there, you know? And it's like, well, who are you to say that? Well, I'm better than you and I own this, so I get to say nobody sends money over here to over there. You know, it's kind of ridiculous, but it's like that is the reality we live in, where, you know, traditionally there's been such censorship and, you know, suppression in terms of the movement of communication information. So this, I look at cryptocurrency, even beyond the money of it, is just really opening up the ease in communication that, you know, because money really, if we think about it in a lot of ways, it's just kind of a medium of exchange for communication, you know, to accommodate the movement as communication. Because it's like, oh, you know, you have this, I have this. It's like, oh, here, let me give you that. It's like, ah, yes, sweet, like, that's awesome. You know, I like that. And so it's like, you know, your money in a lot of ways is kind of like your vote. So, you know, voting, people should be supported to vote however way they want, you know, communicate however way they want. And we got to really trust each other in order for that to work. But at the same time, the beauty of this is that you don't really have to trust anyone. Like, and this has kind of been like the massive issue. And if we look at governments around the world, you know, there's corruption everywhere. Everybody's just trying to, you know, get theirs. And there's all this problem with, you know, basically us humans, that we're, you know, not very good or reliable or trustworthy as a whole species. Like you know, the planet is basically in dire shape based on our relationships with each other. So if we create a way where we remove the possibility for human deception by creating automated systems that are built on code, where the code is law, so to speak, you know, and it's based on consensus, and everybody knows the consensus because the consensus is open source, so that you can understand what you're participating in, you know, we can kind of trust in that. And yeah, so that's, yeah.
Okay, so that kind of leads into a kind of serious question. Do you see cryptocurrency as something that is a possible long-term solution for the global issues that we face, for the issues, let's call it the issues of the human mind that we face, things like greed and hatred and racism, things like that? How do you see cryptocurrency fitting into the role of those issues that we're facing?
Well, in a variety of ways, really. I mean, I think what cryptocurrency can support is basically is the politics of self, which is basically the point of self-government. You know, it's pretty easy in this day and age to point the finger and blame, you know, this government, that guy, that guy. Those people are the ones that are ruining the whole world. Or no, it's not them, it's that group, it's that group, it's that group kind of thing. I think really at its core is it opens up the discussion in terms of how we interact with one another. And that interaction starts with ourselves. And if we look at, you know, if you're to get involved with cryptocurrency in any capacity, it encourages the point of self-responsibility, where all of a sudden you have to be responsible for your funds. You know, you have a wallet where you keep your, you know, your different cryptos or whatnot. You're going to have a private key for that wallet, you know, and password. It's your responsibility to take care of that information, you know. Whereas traditionally, you know, it's kind of like, oh, you don't really have to be responsible for any of your things. Somebody else will look after it for you. And we've kind of been conditioned to accept that as the way our world functions. So by encouraging accountability, you know, literally accountability, and as cryptocurrency is literally just built upon accountability and transparency in so many ways. By, I mean, to put it simply, it's kind of like the merging of privacy and transparency together. Like saying that, you know, we can have our private stuff and keep our things, take care of our things ourselves, but, you know, when we're interacting with one another, that can be, you know, laid out, like you can trust in it. Like if I told you I sent you, you know, some Bitcoin to your address and you're like, I don't know about that. Like you might just be saying that, you know, I can show you the address I sent it to, and then you can verify, look at that on the blockchain. So there's like a public record there. And I think in a lot of ways, accountability is always good. And that accountability does start with ourselves. And I mean, I kind of just gave one simple example of how even the way we take care and hold on to our own money is a point of responsibility, where, you know, there's mixed feelings even about that, being responsible for our own money. And I mean, if we think of everybody, you know, having some money in this world and everybody being responsible for money, and if we just, let's say just for this chat here right now, generalize the definition of what money is, that it's basically, you know, an ancient form of communication. And so if we look at that, saying that, well, you know, everybody is money, everybody is a communicator in this world, and everybody has a voice, and, you know, the majority of the people in this world are regarding their voice, you know, their money, their vote, we're going to create things that are great to the benefit of all of us here. And one other point I'll make is that if we look at a number of these different cryptocurrency projects, their effectiveness is essentially in the community building around them. So a lot of different cryptocurrencies express themselves, you know, with a distinctively different focus. You know, there's cross-pollination for sure, absolutely, and that's totally fine. But the point here is that it's about community building. And that's how anything really takes off effectively. It's like a grassroots movement, and the more people come together, see the value here, see the practical use case, and support it. And so, yeah, I really like this is a big reason I really like it, because I think it supports, you know, people working together and taking responsibility for the creation of things which basically we can direct ourselves, instead of being like, Oh yeah, I just gotta wait for my government to give me the green light to, work with you in South Africa or work with so and so over here to create this cool new application and how we can communicate together and fund projects and do all sorts of awesomely innovative things.
Okay, cool. So that leads me towards what at the moment is my last question.
Okay.
How do you see governments as the world system is now? How do you see governments fitting in with cryptocurrencies? How do these 2 points merge, if at all?
This is a very fascinating question and topic of exploration, and we're seeing actually right now throughout the world is different governments, approach this differently, so to speak. I mean, I think as a general point, most governments at this point are kind of treading very lightly with cryptocurrencies to a certain extent, realizing that this is huge. There's massive potentials here. There's massive implications here in terms of how we've been functioning collectively as a species and the role of government within that. Now, there's different countries that have basically been more pushing strong positions one way than other ways. And we've also seen some flip-flopping around. It's fascinating because, I mean, ultimately, government, the government really is just people, like that's kind of an interesting consideration about, getting into the definition of what is government. Because it's come up recently where, I'd be asking someone, be like, well, what is government? I was talking to my friend one of my friends in the USA, and they're like, I'm like, yeah, what is the government? You keep saying the government. And he's like, well, the White House. I'm like, well, really? Is that the government? Is the White House is the government? Isn't that a house that's white? I don't think if we look in the dictionary, that's what we'll see, is that the government is the house that's white, like it's or in Canada, like, well, no, it's Parliament Hill, where those buildings are. It's like, is that what government means? And if we look into it, I mean, there's different definitions about it, but to put it so simple, it's a point of people here. It's also commonly regarded as government being, the point of control of the mind, basically. And if we look at that, while every person has a mind here, so perhaps all of our participations are influencing the control of all of our minds here. And we're all part of this mind control project because we all have minds, and whether we're controlling our mind or not is influencing everything everywhere. I know I'm kind of going all over with that right now. So to bring it back more, let's say, grounded, and we look at the different bodies of government that represent countries, the different governments that represent countries as bodies of people, elected officials, their service to each country and the people of each country is to support innovation and development to bring prosperity to each said nation. While at the same time, this has kind of been a conflicting issue, typically as countries have been at war with one another, maybe they're not really at war as much as we believe, but that's the narrative because there's, competitive advantages to making people think this way or that way. But ultimately, I see cryptocurrency as a massive support for the best government. Now, maybe this changes our even, definition and outlook of what is government even further, where the emphasis becomes more on self-governance and that the government of a nation is directed differently than how we've regarded it in terms of placing a tremendous amount of power and responsibility into a very small amount of people. Maybe we're learning through cryptocurrency that that doesn't seem to be the best way to direct the flow of the country in the most supportive, beneficial ways. So it's opening up a lot of reflection, consideration into this very question: what is government? How does government work? As this body people here, at the very least, this topic is showcasing us that wait a second, these borders here, maybe they don't really need to be in place the way we've traditionally looked at cutting down all these lines, and that we can sort of create our own world government as people in the world participating and creating the government, so to speak. Obviously this is like a massive topic, and there's so many parallels and directions to go with it. I think in terms of people's participation in the world, just in terms of being an investigator or researcher, it's important to ask questions and look at different implications. And I think always the way of existing in this world, and recognizing that there's a lot of challenges and dare I say problems that exist that could be a lot better than the way things are, is that it's to create solutions that don't go into conflict, so to speak, with the already existing structures and systems that exist, but to kind of non-violently, passively even. And cryptocurrency is kind of a passive thing in that it's been happening, it's been moving, people have been participating, and it's been growing. We kind of by participating in new ways that are better than, let's say, the traditional ways in which we've participated, we make the other systems obsolete over time by no longer participating in those systems in those ways. And it's not to dismiss it or whatever, but it's just kind of like, if we find ways to participate in this world that we deem to be more effective and efficient, it's kind of like our responsibility to do that. And I kind of think cryptocurrency opens up this point in a variety of ways.
Okay, cool. Well, that's all the questions I have for today. Is there anything else that you want to add?
I'm just looking at the live chat here, and I see we have a couple comments. Or here we are. Interesting discussion. Thanks, guys. So in essence, we go back to the human factor, making a best for all use of this tech, and not letting something like greed, control, monopolies to run this tech. And then the follow-up comment was abundance, or that was a different person who made that comment. So let me just kind of, well, first, Cerise, do you have anything to add based on just me reading those couple of comments there?
No.
Okay. Yeah, so just to add a little bit onto that, I think, the focus here is that it does come back to the human and how we participate here. Traditionally, I mean, things are kind of set up where, you got to really just kind of look out for yourself more so than others, just to survive. But, I think we're at a time where there's so much opportunity for communication. I mean, just, not that long ago, it would have been very difficult for me and you to have even just this conversation that we're having now. So I think it's important for us to, challenge ourselves to communicate with others and explore different ideas and possibilities, because that's kind of how we open up our potential and what could be possible is by not suppressing ourselves in the possibilities of what could be. And in this, I think it's important to understand how things exist, as how things have been problematic in terms of greed and control and manipulation. And the markets were mentioned in the comment as well. And I think it's really important to understand how do markets really function? How does market activity really work? It's like, yeah, money moves, exchanges and whatnot, but have we really collectively questioned in terms of how a free market society can function? Do we even have a free market society today? Or has there been so much control and regulation imposed that, many people, historians seem to believe that the last 100 years have been an evolution of human innovation. But, dare I pose the question that innovation perhaps has been massively, stifled over the last 100 years because we've had such control and regulation around even just the very flow of money. And that if we created more support structures just on how money functions in this world, money is exchanged, perhaps innovation would be, exponentially more than what it exists. I mean, it's commonly known that how we exist in this world with products is that many products are designed around planned obsolescence so that you can buy more of that product. I mean, that's an inferior way of functioning, existing. That in itself is a form of communication that we've accepted as valid collectively in this world. And this planned obsolescence is actually quite effective from this business model of getting repeat customers and ensuring that you keep getting new sales. It's like the average laptop computer, 2-year, 3-year lifespan on it, some more, whatever. Let's just take a ballpark general number. Or the light bulb plan to break so that you need more. By changing the narrative, and the focus is not about trying to get the money to survive, but seeing how we use money as the expression to create. I mean, I think this challenges the whole world of how we've traditionally been involved in business with each other, where perhaps because this kind of is a competitive thing. It's just we've had such a ripple effect of what I call the low baller effect, where somebody cuts a corner somewhere to gain an added advantage or profit. And in game theory, this is referred to as a zero-sum game, in the sense that, well, it can even actually be a negative-sum game on this, where it basically, so one guy cuts a corner and he pushes the boundaries or the rules here, and he deviates from the standard of excellence. And that's where it's like everybody's operating at the optimum performance level and ability. Everything is so good. But because they're competing, he wants to try to get an advantage over his competitor or his boss, let's say, who's paying him. So he cuts the corner, and all of a sudden, he gets away with it. So he's having an added benefit to himself, but his added benefit is coming at the expense of the overall quality deterioration. And so, here enter inferiority. And now, another guy who's connected to him in the workforce comes along and is like, yeah, Joe's kind of pushing the bounds here a little bit, but, I could let Joe slide with that, and I could tell a couple other guys to let their quality slide a little bit. And you know what? I don't even have to technically work on Tuesday and Wednesday, because I made an arrangement with Joe and Bob and Sally, and they're paying me, you know, a kickback for that arrangement. And now this guy is making a cut, and now the quality control is, you know, it's been compromised even further. And as you can see, just this example, it's like this ripple effect, ripple effect, ripple effect of just like being clever to cut corners here, cut corners here, cut corners here, when it's like, guys, what are we really cutting when everybody's, you know, just doing all these cuts? You know, we erode the overall like standard quality of living. And I think globally, that's what we have here today, is there's just been such corner cutting happening as like the accepted playing field that we're all on, is that's how you play, is just make your cut, you know. And we think like it's a good sporting analogy almost, you know, you're trying to make the team or be on the team, and you don't want to get cut from the team, so you're doing, or you're willing to do whatever it takes. And I think the overall outlook, you know, we're at a point in time with communication being what it is where we can create, you know, better models, better ways in which we can function together. And I think that's the best expression of a free market economy, is encouraging competition be to, you know, push the standards of excellence and basically eliminate inferior products competition by creating like sound relationships that are supportive for everyone.
Yeah, that sounds good.
Yeah, this was a cool hangout, Cerise. It's definitely, I think it's cool for me, it's cool for you, and probably maybe cool for anybody else listening. Just these kinds of conversation, you know, just like allow us to get looking at things in more perspectives and whatnot. So maybe we'll do this again sometime.
Yes, definitely. Thanks very much for answering my questions.
Awesome. All right, anybody who is tuning in, this was kind of the first Mike talking about crypto, Cerise talking about crypto. I think it's something I will be talking more about, making more videos about. I've been writing a little bit about it already. I would like to do some more writing about it and make some more videos about it, as there's a lot of cool discussions that are worth having. And yeah, so see you around, and until next time.
Okay, bye.